Hi everybody, Josh Bycer here from GameWisdom.com. Welcome to today's Critical Thought, and we are talking fans and fandom. I've put together, I guess, a little piece of modern art there. But fandom is one of those elements that we've seen get a lot of traction lately, especially more of the toxic side of things. There's been the recent attacks by No Man's Sky's fans on people who say anything bad about the game. A recent, I think, artist and writer on Steven Universe got attacked and got off of Twitter because of it. And fandom is one of those things that I personally don't quite understand. That's not to say there's anything bad about. It's just one of those aspects I've never really, I guess, prescribed to myself. You can come up to me and say, I hate Mario Galaxy, or Renowned Explorer sucks, or trying to think of something else. I guess you hate Earth, Wind, and Fire, and it won't really register anything with me. It won't bother me. And I think part of this has sort of been how I've always had that analytical and critical mind. I mean, even back in the old days with the Mario versus Sonic, the console wars, I was able to get both systems. I never really became a die-hard fan of either. And I think that's sort of translated into where I'm at today. I still love Nintendo, but I'm more than willing to talk about the vast amount of mistakes and issues they've had over the last, I guess, a little bit, maybe going on a little bit more than a decade. Now, the thing with fans, and don't worry, my superpower to relate almost anything to the game industry will kick in about a minute. There's that old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. For me, I can't see the trees for the forest. Even with the stuff that I really like, I can't help but analyze it and look over it and always look at it or break it down from a bird's eye point of view. I need to take a quick little sip of water here. It is really, really hot here today. And I think that's definitely a major part of being able to be a critic. Is you have to be able to remain objective and not get so involved in the, I guess, the fandom of a property. Now, with the video game industry, this actually has an additional risk and challenge, and that is being a developer and knowing when and when not to listen to your fan base. And I know that sounds very weird. You're supposed to be listening to your fans. The video games are a consumer product. But there are limits to how much you can listen to their suggestions and their recommendations. And this has become even more important over the last 3-4 years with the rise of crowdfunding, Kickstarter, early access, and the greater transparency that's in effect these days. On the Perceptive podcast, multiple times, I've spoken to developers about their thoughts on early access and being able to show their games to their fans and get feedback. And almost like 9 out of 10 developers love it. A good example, when I spoke with Tim Keenan of Misfits Attic on the game Duskers, he basically said that his fans were able to find bugs and problems that he wouldn't have been able to catch because he was too busy making the game. And this kind of transparency just works wonders for game development. Being able to show your game to thousands of eyes and people willing to play it is just worth its weight in gold when you're trying to figure out, is something working? Do these mechanics work? Is the UI great? What do you think of this? And so on. But on the other hand, there are developers who aren't fans of early access, and I've spoken to a few. The biggest complaint that I hear about is the fact that because game design is such an iterative and evolving process, they don't want to show their games to people who aren't ready for it. As we know, video games in their early stage, we're talking, first versions of alpha or even into their beta, can be very rough to play and to look at. And developers don't want gamers, I guess, souling themselves on the fact that the game's going to go from here all the way to here and be this amazing 100% thing. I just realized I did like the complete wrong order for that. I'm sorry. But when it comes to being a game developer, there's two parts about when you don't want to listen to your fan base. The first is when your fans are suggesting things that are going to break the core vision or the core gameplay loop of your title. And this is one of the very hard things to do. When I spoke with the developers of Battletech several times on the podcast, we talked about how Harebrained Schemes has taken to knowing when to say no. And it sounds, again, very weird to say no to your fans. But you need to understand, at the end of the day, game design is very much a dictatorship or a monarchy. You, as the game designer or your team, have to have the final say in how your game's going to look and evolve. While your fans can make great suggestions, you need to be able to separate the signal from the noise. Someone saying your game sucks and I hate it is different than someone saying, I think your weapon balance with these three guns doesn't work when you compare it to the rest of your weapons. And being able to understand criticism from complaints is a very vital tool, especially in terms of PR. We've seen a lot of game developers suffer in the PR department, yelling at fans, not being able to properly take criticism, and so on. And again, while it's great to listen to your fans, at the end of the day, you need to know what your game is going to be about. When I spoke with Charles of Java Technologies on Conceal Intent, he talked about how he had to fight for some of his design decisions with his fan base. And the reason that he said was very simple. If he made those changes, he wouldn't have been making Concealed Intent anymore. And that's what you have to understand as a game designer. What is your game going to be about? And then you have to stick to that. It's what I've talked about several times with harmonizing game design. Once you know what that foundation is, you have to abide by it. Making changes to it will affect the scope of your game and, more importantly, the quality of it. I'm really sorry about these constant drink breaks. Again, it's like 100 degrees here today. Now, the other time when you don't want to listen to your fans is when it comes to making your game more accessible. There's always been that push and pull between satisfying your fans and making your game more appealing to more people. We've seen a lot of independent developers struggle with this. Paradox Interactive is actually a great example of this. They make some really amazing games, but they are horrible when it comes to showing it to new people. I've bounced off, I think, 4 or 5 of their games in the span of 5 or 6 years. And the reason, and this is another major challenge of a game developer, is you have to get out of your own echo chamber. The first echo chamber is when developers just spend 2 to 3 years alone with their team making a game without any outside involvement or showing their game. Now that has gone away to some extent thanks to early access. But now there's the fan echo chamber. And that is when you're only listening to your fans or your most hardcore of your fan base. And again, it's good to listen to them. But when you're trying to get a fresh perspective on your game or see how your game looks for a newcomer, they just cannot help you. And in some cases, they can also harm you. If people are talking about UI issues or things that they don't understand, you don't want to immediately shoot them down or just let your fans tear them apart. The thing about your fans is you've already won these people over. They've spent the hours learning your game, they know how it all works, and they've lost that fresh eye perspective. That is very important when it comes to accessibility. The best games that I've seen are those that have managed to balance both sides of the casual and core base. Especially for multiplayer games, you need a casual audience as much as you need a hardcore. The casual is going to flesh out your consumer base and allow more people to play, while the hardcore are going to be the people that are going to enjoy it and sort of give the game that following. It's sort of like the sports teams of just about any sport out there or even competitive leagues in esports. But the point is, you need fresh eyes to look at your game just as much as you need the guys who have spent hundreds of hours on it. For instance, with the game Clockwork Empires, which I've looked at several times on the cast, and on the YouTube channel, at this point, I know a lot of the intricacies of the game. I know how weird the UI is. I know where to look to find things. So that means that when they make changes or they add new stuff, I can generally find it very quickly. But for a new player, a lot of the stuff is still hidden in the layers of the UI. And this goes back to, I guess, my advantages of being a critic. Well, not looking like that, of course, but because I always keep myself to that critical eye, I have at least a better chance of spotting trouble spots for new players compared to people who are so immersed in the game that they already, see it, they've already gone past it, essentially. And again, as a game designer, there's just a lot of balls for you to juggle and a lot of hats for you to wear. You need to be able to look at your game and you need to have people looking at your game from all sides of it. The newcomers, the people who are starting to understand it, and the experts. Because that's how you're going to make the most polished version of that game. And too often in the past, these changes would come too late, after the game was released and was already dinged by players and reviewers for whatever these issues are. So the lesson of this critical thought is very simple. If you're going to go in early access, make sure to listen to all your feedback. Again, someone who's only played your game for 30 minutes can have just as much insight into some issues as someone who's spent 100 hours on it. And at the end of the day, you want both of those people to enjoy your game, not one or the other. Now, of course, the issue of knowing when to not dumb down or streamline your game, that is another topic altogether. But that's way too big for this critical thought. So we're going to end things here for this video. As always, if you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out game-wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter under GW Bycer for the latest updates of new content. And you can find me on Patreon under Game Wisdom. Your donations can not only help to keep Game Wisdom going and support myself, but we have a variety of new rewards open, including getting a video shout-out and having a podcast in your honor as our new top tier goal. Thanks again for listening to this critical thought. I'll be back tomorrow with another one. Thanks again, and see you all then.